Day 21. Welcome back everyone that has been following my journey, and a warm welcome to the new subscribers and viewers that have found this diary vlog. My name is Tanya, I'm 52 years old, I live on the east coast of Scotland, and this is my personal development diary vlog that is accounting my personal development journey through my 50 decades and launching my online coaching and therapy, which is focusing on hypnotherapy business, and doing the pivot. My kind of background was in financial services, qualified accountant, but I found my purpose by doing all the additional training to become a qualified coach and hypnotherapist, because I truly believe that is my purpose and mission in life, to share through my personal experiences, but also through the tools and techniques, the extensive reading and courses that I've attended to throughout my life, that I can actually impact people. Now, I know that there's a lot of transformation gurus out there, and each person is probably saying the same things but packaged up in a different way. So I'm trying to connect with my tribe through my brand of being heard, being brave and being free, because we all need to be seen and heard in order for us to be able to articulate and become aware of our stories and appreciate our blind spots and find tools and techniques that are going to help us to be able to navigate potential pain points and suffering that may be experiencing, to then help us find routines that are going to be helpful and that we're able to continue on our transformation journey without necessarily going and paying for coaching or hypnotherapy sessions. So if there's things that I can actually share through my journey, I'm happy to do so through this channel and create a community and tribe. Now, what we were actually doing for the past couple of days is I was starting to go into more kind of storytelling mode rather than hints and tips, and it's exploring some of the experiences that I went through with low self-esteem, burnout, and now I'm going to describe in this video a traumatic experience that happened to me when I was 41 and I was doing my kind of traveling, but I hadn't properly processed it. I reframed it and gave it a totally different meaning. But those lessons that needed to be learned, I finally came to learn them 18 months ago. So this is where I'm going to try and sort of like, this video might be a wee bit longer than my others, that I'm trying to keep it a wee bit more contained, but there is a lot of detail that I feel is pertinent to me explaining the story, because I don't want you to go away from this thinking that Buenos Aires is not a safe place to travel to, and that human beings are mean and nasty, when there is lessons to be learned, and I have reframed it, but I'm also learning through that reframing that I probably opted to do it a wee bit too fast, and I didn't really listen to my body and take note of all the things that I've been advocating since I've done my training, which is listen to your body wisdom and your gut and intuition. So to sort of like take you on the journey with me and hopefully articulate in a way that you can actually follow through. So when I was 41, I decided that I wanted to go and get another thing off my bucket list, and that was to attend the Rio Carnival. So I travelled to Rio de Janeiro and I spent a few days there taking part in the kind of festivities and having an absolute awesome time. This was a backpacking experience for me. I was travelling solo, and even though I was 41, the kind of groups that I was associating with were a mixture. So there was people that were older than me, people my same age, and a lot younger as well. So it was a wonderful experience to stay in backpacker hostels and interact with people. along the route. So once I finished the Rio Carnival festivities, I then did a bus trip all the way to Buenos Aires. But what happened was I stopped in Porto Alegre, which is probably about 2/3 down on the coast of Brazil. But this was a little bit more kind of inland. And I met up with a Peruvian friend and had an absolutely awesome time there for a few days before continuing on to Uruguay and Montevideo. Apologies, not pronouncing the capital city correctly. And then after a few days in Montevideo, I got the Sea Cat ferry over to Buenos Aires. Now, as soon as I stepped in Buenos Aires in Argentina, I just felt, oh, I can let go of the hypervigilance that I had in Rio, which was single female traveling on our own. There could be pickpockets, there could be people wanting to con you into taking your money and your possessions. So when I got to Buenos Aires, that kind of hypervigilance seemed to sort of dissipate from me, and it was probably because nothing had happened in the preceding like 15 days, and I sort of like got a little bit confident and I sort of let my guard down. And the first hostel that I stayed in was a very kind of modern, but there was a lot of people staying at it, so there was a lot of in and out happening. So I decided after a few days that I wanted to find a different hostel that was smaller and it had a more kind of community vibe where you could interact more with the crowd, and I wanted that kind of sort of variation in age groups that you could actually start making connections. So before I left that first hostel, one of my dorm mates had raved about this neighbourhood in Buenos Aires that I had to go and visit, and it was called La Boca. Now, I didn't do any research and I didn't ask enough questions to find out what organised tour she actually used and when the kind of days it would be to actually best visit. So I just had it in the back of my head, La Boca is an area that I want to actually visit because it sounds interesting, but I didn't look into the kind of finer details. So then when I was leaving the one hostel to move to the second hostel, I was actually warned by the reception staff that there was a lot of kind of con artists that operate in groups of 3, and I was to be super vigilant navigating from the few blocks between the 2 hostels, because once they saw you with a backpack, they would actually target you. And what would happen is one of the people would actually come up close and throw a liquid on you, which would be absolutely stinking, and it would distract you. So your attention would go from walking ahead and being aware who's around you, and as a result of that, then a second person would intervene, that they would come over to try and give you comfort and support and help you out, while the third person that you were oblivious that they were even in the vicinity would actually try and get stuff out of your backpack, and maybe the first person might have gone to help them. But what they sort of advised me to do is once I actually, even if someone threw stuff over me, rather than my first reaction to be, oh, what is it? And then the second person comes over and offers assistance, that I actually willing to take their assistance. The moment something happens, it was for you to start making as much noise as possible, for you to start shouting as loud as possible, potentially using profanities to be able to startle them, because they're not expecting you to have that reaction. And you're also raising awareness from other passerbys that this activity is actually happening. So if someone else was wanting to intervene to try and help the situation, you've got that option. So I was made aware of what the con was, and sure enough, on my way between the first hostel to the second one, I did have that first attack that happened. Now, because I had been warned, and it was like very kind of familiar in my head at that, because I was literally just told that story and what I needed to do, I started shouting, screaming and swearing, and eventually the second person left and the third sort of went. I became aware of my surroundings, and I made sure that I started walking really, really fast while shouting and waving my arms and making as much noise as possible. Now, I should put into context that I didn't speak any Spanish, and also I knew where I was actually heading to, so I knew that I had a few more kind of blocks to go through. So that first attack didn't then culminate into anything else other than I was covered in a stinking kind of liquid that was a combination of several materials to just make it as pungent as possible, to sort of like make you want to take the assistance that was being offered. So once I arrived to the second hostel, I recounted what had happened, and they told me, yes, this is what happens, but sometimes it's not the same kind of combination. So that first attack, I actually had 2 females and a male, but sometimes it will be 2 males and a female, and in some instances it could be a variation of age groups as well, that they sort of, the way that they sort of organise themselves. So once I got to that second hostel, I went and had a shower, got changed, and I thought, well, now that I'm settled into the hostel, I'm going to veer out. And at the back of my head, I had this notion, yeah, I'm going to go and visit La Boca. Now, I hadn't done any research into it. I didn't even ask the reception staff if that was a wise idea. I just thought that's something that I'm going to do. So leaving the second hostel, on my way to La Boca, I actually had a second attack. And this time it was the other combination, so it was 2 males and a female. But this actually happened in a very kind of publicly exposed area, which I was actually really surprised that it happened in such an open space. Cars were on either side, so it was just like, how, like, fair enough doing it in the kind of back alley that I was walking previously between the 2 hostels, but this was an open exposed areas. Cars were walking by, they knew what was going on, so I just started shouting, screaming and shouting. So what that then prompted me to do is change my small backpack that I had to actually put it front facing. So rather than it being on my back, it was on my front and it was tied round my waist, so it was very kind of secure. So I managed to sort of like deviate from the second attack as well, screaming, shouting, and eventually they actually left. Now, in hindsight, this was my second attempted mugging situation. I should have gone back to the hostel, or I should have gone to a cafe, and I should have just been glad that I escaped 2 mugging attempts. Instead, in my wisdom at that time, I thought, well, I said I wanted to go to La Boca. It's a beautiful day. I might as well go there. But rather than going on the kind of main roads, because this has happened on a main road, I thought, yeah, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the back alleys instead. So this is where I walk into La Boca at 2 p.m. in the afternoon when it is deadly quiet. I saw some police cars sort of like going up and down, and I made the incorrect assumption of this must be super safe because there's so much police presence and activity, so I'm totally fine walking into this neighbourhood on my own. And as I was sort of getting towards probably the main kind of road that was leading through La Boca, I ended up this woman sort of appeared in the kind of centre, and she started shouting. Now, I didn't understand a word that she was saying, but something just felt odd. And she was basically instructing people, look, there's a tourist here, perfect opportunity, come down, and actually it's perfect opportunity for her to be mugged. And so what I did is, rather than sort of like backtracking, I just kept on walking towards this woman and the kind of bigger road. And what ended up happening was that 4 guys all of a sudden, so 4 males appeared out of her shouting, screaming and shouting, so my attention was on her. And then all of a sudden 4 men sort of appeared, and I ended up going up against a wall, wearing my backpack to the front, and basically I felt cornered. So I had 4 guys in front of me. One of them was actually holding a gun, and 3 of them were trying to pull the backpack off me, because that's basically what they wanted. They wanted the backpack. And what I've not sort of like recounted is before I went to Rio, I had spent the previous year, I had joined a karate club to get some exercise, and also to be able to sort of like let go of any kind of tension and be able to do some punching and kicking. And I was a yellow belt by that point, and because they knew I was actually going to be going to South America, they had actually shown me a few kind of moves in terms of being able to be strong in my body and sort of like be strong and centered, so I couldn't be sort of like thrown off balance. So here's me with 4 guys in front of me, 3 pulling me in different directions, and I'm crouched down and I am super strong. And these 3 guys are going in opposite directions from each other, so they're not able to sort of like work together as a cohesive unit to be able to get the backpack. If they had a pair of scissors, that would have been more effective than what they were actually trying to do. The guy with the gun, this is where my life sort of went into a bit of slow motion. So this was kind of survival mode. And I'm sort of looking at the gun and I'm thinking, that just looks fake. That is not real. And that's what was playing in my head. And I was like, well, if it's real, I'm done and over. And if it's fake, then like these guys aren't working together, so I'm just going to hold on to the backpack and I'm going to stand firm. And then they're fighting off each other, the kind of direction that they were going. So then I started getting braver, because they weren't able to take the backpack from me. The guy wasn't shooting me, so I started screaming and shouting, at which point I started hearing the shutters starting to close, and I thought, okay, so no one's going to come to my rescue here. This is me in survival mode, trying to sort of like fend off these 4 guys. And because then I was starting to make more notice, and because there was obviously police patrols patrolling the area, they wanted this to happen really, really fast. So the guy that was facing me ended up sort of letting go of the backpack, and what he instead did was he punched me in the nose. And by punching me in the nose, what it did was it made me let go of holding the backpack, because your natural reaction is to go to sort of protect your face. So I went to sort of like shield my face, because I was starting to bleed. I had a massive nosebleed as a result. And me doing that and letting go of the backpack enabled them to eventually, okay, let's unzip the backpack and take the stuff out of it. So they took my wallet, my camera, probably my prized possession at that point was the purple Havaiana flip-flops that I had got from Rio de Janeiro, because it had that kind of memory associated with it, my sunglasses, and the one saving grace was that they didn't actually find my iPhone that was at the bottom of the backpack. So once this had happened and they got all the stuff that they thought they could get out, they just scrambled. They went for it. And at that point, adrenaline is really kicking in for me. So I run to the top of the street. I find a police officer that was walking by. Now, not speaking a word of Spanish, them not speaking English. I just started like showing I'm bleeding. This muggings happened. And eventually a couple of patrol cars came over and we went down to the actual scene, picked up all the odds and pieces that were lying on the ground. And then they took me to the police station, because there was so much blood that they knew that they couldn't just leave me. They needed to sort of take care of me. So I went to the police station and I ended up staying about 4.5 hours, because they needed to get a translator for me to provide a statement. And they also got a doctor to come and check me out very briefly. And then they took me to the hospital, where I got x-rays and a tetanus jag to sort of like help with making sure that I didn't have any kind of internal damage. And all that information ended up helping towards my they gave me a police report that then I was able to make an insurance claim to get the money back for the camera and the money that I had lost in my possessions. But I was in total shock at that point. That kind of sheer embarrassment and annoyance that I hadn't done any investigation in the area that I was actually going into, and the fact that, oh my god, if that was a real gun and I could have like given up my life for the contents of a backpack. So for me at that point, that whole kind of shock, I ended up doing what Tanya did so masterfully for the previous 40 years of our life: suppressed our feelings and emotions and reframed the situation. So my reframing was, okay, I actually had 2 attempted muggings earlier on that day that I managed to walk away unscathed from. And then this third time, it was bound to happen. Something was bound to happen. Now, the positive was that I was alive, that my nose wasn't broken, that it was just material possessions that they took away from me. And I sort of reframed it, that if I can survive this, I can survive anything. So in my head, I was like, everything, I was invincible. Everything was fine. And I continued on with the rest of my trip. I think I had another 4 or 5 days, and I proceeded up to the Gazu Falls. And I was absolutely determined that this experience wasn't going to dampen my moods and spirits and my experience, because there was multiple people that came into that police station in that 4.5 hours that I was there that had similar situations, and it was predominantly females traveling, even if it was in like little groups of 2 or 3. But they were actually pickpocketing and trying to get their bags, or like they were coming with mopeds and trying to steal their handbags or backpacks, because this is it. It's a poor neighborhood and they see an opportunity, and of course they're going to take it. So in my rational head, I could justify that they did what I would have expected them to do, and I was absolutely flabbergasted that I actually didn't do what I thought I was going to do, which would have been take my backpack and I walk away unscathed. Instead, I actually fought. And it surprised me that I would actually fight in that situation, especially with 4 males. So it gave me a kind of sort of warped kind of view, and I felt super powerful as a result of it, invincible in a sense. And because I suppressed the kind of feelings and the trauma and the emotions of it, I thought, I can just get on with the rest of my life and everything's going to be fantastic. But what I've actually found on self-reflection since then is that all that trauma, all that emotions, the feelings, because they were being suppressed, they were still in my body. I was still carrying them along. So my weight had been really, really good, and I was feeling fit and healthy. And as a result of this experience, slowly over the next year, 2 years, there was flashbacks that were coming back, and my eating was starting to become a lot more emotionally triggered, not realizing that the underlying root cause of the kind of overeating and the binge eating that sort of like took over again was as a result of that experience. I can sort of see that in hindsight now, looking back 10 years ago, that this had actually happened. And this is where our body, emotions that we're actually feeling at the moment, if we don't become aware of them, if we don't acknowledge and accept them for what they are, and then if we don't articulate them and release their power, they're just stored up emotions within our body and within our subconscious. And therefore, in another situation that might be less triggering, but you might feel triggered, and it's because it's created that emotional connection. Oh, I feel threatened, and therefore I'm going to react the same way that I reacted the last time. And this is where you end up sort of building trauma upon trauma upon trauma, even though the kind of more recent events aren't traumatic. So I recall that a year later, I ended up being in a work situation, and a fellow member of staff actually just turned up at my desk and just started all of a sudden shouting at me, and because she was frustrated and annoyed that something hadn't happened. It wasn't as a result of my kind of effort or work. She was frustrated and she was just letting go. But the way that she tackled the situation was, I'm sitting down, she's standing in front of me and she is shouting at me, and it triggered this kind of fight or flight kind of response. But on this occasion, what I did was I actually just burst out in tears, and I was absolutely shaking, and I didn't realize that that was a direct association of what I had experienced a year previously. It was just my body was starting to release some of those kind of the trauma and the emotion that I had sort of like kept suppressed for such a long period of time. Because other than on and off crying that I did in that police station for the 4.5 hours because it was the shock, after that I was absolutely laughing and joking about the whole experience. I'm going to put on the thumbnail, the kind of 2 photos of how my face was actually swollen originally, and then afterwards the bruising that I had, and I was sort of making a joke that, oh my god, I'm like Mussolini or Charlie Chaplin. I've got my little moustache, which was a dark kind of the dark bruising on my upper lip. And I was like, well, in future, if I wanted to get dressed up in Halloween, I know now that this is an effective look, and you can actually sort of see it. But I sort of like, I had reframed it and I tried to sort of position it in a kind of positive, upbeat kind of way, because I wasn't looking for pity or sympathy. I didn't feel like a victim, because in my rational head, I shouldn't have been in that neighborhood. I shouldn't have gone on my own, and I should have been able to speak Spanish. So I, like, if anything, I was criticizing myself for all the things that I hadn't done, and not really acknowledging that, all right, I had done all these things, but on the flip side, I didn't deserve to be punched in the face. I didn't deserve to be mugged. But there was lessons that I needed to learn through that experience, because I was holding on to emotion again. And it's only been, and since I turned sort of like 50 and I've been doing this kind of deeper self-reflection, that I'm starting to realize that you need to be present. You need to feel calm and centered within your body. You need to listen to your body. Feel the feeling until it no longer needs to be felt. And if your kind of thinking is sort of taking you in a kind of negative spiral, then challenge that thinking and push it into a positive one, but don't dismiss the feeling. Acknowledge it for what it is. You don't want to stay there, but you don't also want to ignore it. So I'm going to leave it there, and we'll sort of tackle the kind of maybe some other kind of key lessons that I've learned tomorrow, and then how the rest of my journey sort of continued. So a massive thank you. I appreciate it's a really long video, but I wanted to provide sufficient context. Buenos Aires is a wonderful city. The people are absolutely amazing and very welcoming, and it's just, that is a neighborhood that you need to go into with the right kind of tour group. You need to go and get the kind of benefit of the experience, which I did a couple of days later, because I needed to conquer my fear, and I went back to the neighborhood. But I was in an organized bus tour, and revisiting those the kind of location sort of took away that kind of fear, because I didn't want to be that I was super hyper vigilant that I didn't want to leave the dorm or the hostel. So from that kind of perspective, thank you very, very much. Have you experienced a traumatic event in your life that has had impacts further down in your life that you want to be able to sort of share? Is there, what help did you actually seek? Have you been able to turn a corner within your journey? If you feel open, because I appreciate this is vulnerable information, and you might not feel inclined to sort of share, but if you wanted to reach out on a one-to-one basis, I'm happy for you to send me an email. The details are down in the description below. I want you to know that you are seen, you are heard, You are brave no matter what your choices were in the situation that you were in. And let's work together over the next coming weeks and vlogs to sort of support each other and create this community where we can actually all thrive. So thank you very much for watching, and until tomorrow, go and seize the day, have an awesome day, and remember, there's always choices in life, so choose wisely. Bye.